The morning outside the Flagstaff courthouse didn't feel normal. There was something heavy in the air. Something tense. The kind of silence that only happens right before a storm. Fans, reporters, and curious onlookers packed the courthouse steps long before the doors even opened. Cameras were already pointed at the entrance. Microphones were ready. Everyone knew they were about to witness something historic. For years, the Brown family had been one of the most talked about families on reality television. Their complicated plural marriage had fascinated viewers all over the world. But today, the cameras weren't filming a TV show. Today the drama was real. This was the courtroom showdown that many believed would finally end the Brown family dynasty, and the two people at the center of it all were about to walk through those doors. Christine arrived first. A black SUV rolled to a stop outside the courthouse. The door opened slowly, and Christine stepped out wearing a simple navy dress. Her blonde hair was neatly curled, and her expression was calm, almost unreadable. She didn't smile for the cameras. She didn't speak to reporters. She simply gave a small nod and walked toward the courthouse entrance. Beside her was her attorney, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly how serious this moment was. Christine didn't need to say anything. Her presence alone made it clear she hadn't come here to argue. She had come here to win. A few minutes later, another vehicle arrived, and suddenly the crowd erupted. Kody Brown stepped out. His golden curls were pulled back into a tight ponytail. He wore a sharp black suit, his face locked into a hard expression as flashes from cameras exploded around him. He walked toward the courthouse quickly, almost aggressively, like a man determined to prove he was still in control. But anyone paying close attention could see the tension in his posture. The stiff shoulders, the tight jaw. The way his eyes kept darting toward the cameras, because today wasn't a reality show reunion. Today was a legal battle. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere felt even heavier. Whispers filled the hallways as people gathered outside Courtroom 3. Lawyers shuffled papers. Court staff moved quickly through the halls. Everyone knew the same thing: years of family conflict were about to be dragged into the open. When the courtroom doors finally opened, the crowd inside went silent. The bailiff's voice echoed through the room. "All rise." The judge entered with calm authority, her presence instantly commanding the room. She adjusted her glasses and looked over the case file before speaking. This case concerns the dissolution of a marriage, the custody of a minor child, and the division of shared property. Her voice remained steady, but her next words cut sharply through the tension. This courtroom is not a television studio. I expect professionalism from everyone involved. It was a reminder no one in the room needed, because for the first time, the Brown family drama wasn't being edited for television. There would be no producers, no dramatic music, no carefully crafted storyline. This was real life. Christine sat quietly at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded tightly together. Across the room, Kody leaned back in his chair, trying to appear calm. But the tension between them was impossible to ignore. The clerk then announced the case title: Brown vs. Brown. A simple name. Yet everyone in that courtroom understood the truth. This wasn't just a divorce. This was the collapse of a family that had spent years presenting itself as united. Christine's attorney stood first. She explained that Christine had spent decades trying to make the marriage work. She had raised children, maintained the household, and contributed financially to family property. But in the end, she had been left without the stability she deserved. Christine was asking for two things: primary custody of her daughter, and her rightful share of the family land known as Coyote Pass. The mention of that name, whispers spread through the courtroom. For years, Coyote Pass had been the symbol of the family's dream. A piece of land where the entire family planned to build homes and live together. But that dream had never happened. Instead, the property had become one of the biggest sources of conflict in the entire family. Kody's attorney quickly fired back. He argued that the case wasn't about fairness, that it was about control. According to his argument, Kody had always tried to remain an active father, and Christine's decision to move their daughter to Utah had damaged that relationship. The courtroom soon filled with testimony. Friends, neighbors, and witnesses described what they had seen over the years, and again, the same picture began to emerge. Christine was the parent handling the daily responsibilities: school drop-offs, doctor visits, late-night care when their daughter was sick. When Kody finally took the stand, he spoke passionately about loving his daughter and wanting to stay involved in her life. But then came the moment that shifted everything. Christine's attorney asked a simple question: Can you tell the court the last time you spent an overnight visit with your daughter before she moved to Utah? Kody paused as he looked toward the ceiling, then toward his attorney, but the answer never came. I don't remember the date. The silence in the courtroom was deafening, because sometimes a single moment can reveal more than hours of testimony. The second day of the trial turned to another explosive issue: money. Specifically the disputed land known as Coyote Pass. Christine's attorney presented financial records showing that she had contributed money toward the property for years. Then an independent property appraiser revealed something shocking. The land had dramatically increased in value. If sold today, it could produce a large profit. Kody reacted angrily, insisting the land had always been meant as a future home for the family, not a financial asset to divide in court. But the judge made one thing clear. The law recognizes documented contributions, and Christine had provided proof. Finally, on the last day of the trial, the courtroom filled once again as the judge prepared to deliver her decision. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. Christine sat silently. Kody stared straight ahead. Then the judge spoke. Primary custody of their daughter would be awarded to Christine. The tears slipped down Christine's cheek as she quietly exhaled. But the judge wasn't finished. Regarding the disputed property, the court ruled that Christine was entitled to a financial settlement equal to her share of the land's current value. If the payment was not made within 6 months, the land would be sold. Gasps spread through the courtroom. Kody sat frozen. His jaw clenched tightly as the reality of the decision sank in. When asked if she wished to make a final statement, Christine stood slowly. Her voice was calm but powerful. "I didn't come here to hurt anyone," she said. "I came here to protect my daughter and secure my future." Moments later, the judge struck the gavel. The case was over. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions as cameras flashed wildly. Christine gave only one short answer: "I feel free." Kody walked past the cameras without saying a word, and within hours, the headlines spread across the internet. For viewers around the world, it felt like the most dramatic moment the Brown family had ever faced. But for Christine and Kody, it wasn't entertainment. It was the end of a marriage, the end of a dream, and the beginning of a completely new chapter. As the courtroom settled into silence, Christine's attorney slowly stood up. The room instantly became more attentive. This was the moment when the arguments would begin. Her voice was calm but confident as she addressed the judge. She explained that Christine had spent decades building her life around the family. She had raised children, supported the household, and played a central role in keeping the family functioning during difficult times. But despite those years of commitment, Christine had eventually reached a painful conclusion. The marriage was no longer sustainable. According to her attorney, Christine wasn't asking the court for revenge or punishment. She was simply asking for fairness. 2 requests were placed before the judge. First, primary custody of her daughter. Second, a financial settlement tied to the family property known as Coyote Pass. The moment that name was mentioned, quiet murmurs spread through the courtroom. For years, Coyote Pass had represented the Brown family's future. It was the land where they had once dreamed of building homes and living together as one large family. But that dream had slowly faded. Instead of becoming a symbol of unity, the property had turned into one of the biggest sources of conflict. Christine's attorney continued presenting documents that showed Christine had financially contributed toward the land over time. Then she made a powerful point. While the family had always talked about shared dreams, the legal documents told a different story, and those documents showed Christine had a legitimate stake in the property. When it was Kody's attorney's turn, the tone inside the courtroom quickly shifted. He stood and immediately challenged the narrative being presented. According to him, the case wasn't as simple as it sounded. He argued that Kody had always tried to remain an involved father. In his view, the real issue began when Christine made the decision to move their daughter to Utah. That move, he claimed, had created distance between father and child. The courtroom then moved into witness testimony. Friends, neighbors, and people who had observed the family over the years began sharing their experiences. Many of them described the same pattern. Christine was often the parent handling the daily responsibilities, school routines, doctor appointments, late nights caring for a sick child. Again and again, witnesses described Christine as the consistent presence in her daughter's life. Then came one of the most anticipated moments of the trial. Kody Brown was called to the stand. He walked to the witness chair slowly, adjusting his suit as he sat down. When he began speaking, His voice carried emotion that he spoke about loving his children and wanting to remain a strong father figure. He insisted that the family struggles had been complicated and that many factors had contributed to the breakdown of the marriage. At first, the testimony seemed to help his case, but then Christine's attorney approached for cross-examination. She asked a few basic questions about his relationship with his daughter, and then she asked one question that suddenly changed the atmosphere inside the room. Can you tell the court the last time you spent a full overnight visit with your daughter before she moved to Utah? Kody paused as he looked down for a moment. Then he glanced toward the ceiling, as if searching his memory. Several seconds passed. The silence inside the courtroom grew heavier with every moment. Finally, he answered quietly, I don't remember the exact date. The room remained completely still. Sometimes a single answer can say more than a long explanation, and in that moment, the tension inside the courtroom became impossible to ignore. The following day of the trial focused on something even more explosive: money. Specifically, the disputed property at Coyote Pass. Christine's legal team introduced financial records that showed she had contributed money toward the land for several years. But the most surprising moment came when an independent property expert took the stand. After reviewing market conditions, the appraiser revealed that the land had significantly increased in value. If it was sold today, the profit could be far larger than anyone had originally expected. The revelation caused immediate reactions across the courtroom. Kody's expression hardened. He quickly insisted that the property had never been meant as a financial investment. According to him, it had always been intended as the future home of the entire family. But the judge calmly reminded both sides of something important. In court, intentions matter far less than documented contributions, and the documents clearly showed Christine had invested money into the property. By the end of the second day, the tension in the courtroom had only grown stronger. Both sides had presented powerful arguments. Both had tried to defend their version of the story, but everyone in that room understood the same thing. The final decision now rested entirely in the hands of the judge, and when that decision finally came, it would change everything. By the third day of the trial, the atmosphere inside the courthouse had completely changed. The quiet curiosity from the first day had been replaced with something far heavier. Everyone in the courtroom now understood how serious the situation had become. Years of family history had been discussed. Personal details had been revealed. Financial records had been examined. Now there was only one thing left: the decision. Early that morning, the courtroom filled once again. Reporters sat quietly with their notebooks ready, while spectators whispered softly to one another. Christine sat at her table, her posture calm but tense. Across the room, Kody remained silent, staring straight ahead as if trying to prepare himself for whatever might come next. Then the bailiff's voice echoed through the room, "All rise." The judge entered and took her seat. The entire courtroom went still. She opened the case file and began speaking carefully, summarizing the key issues that had been presented during the trial. First, she addressed the matter of custody. The judge explained that the court had carefully reviewed testimony from both sides, along with evidence regarding each parent's role in the child's life. She acknowledged that both parents clearly cared for their daughter, but the evidence showed that one parent had been consistently responsible for daily care and stability. The judge then delivered the first ruling. Primary custody would be granted to Christine. For a moment, Christine closed her eyes as if releasing a breath she had been holding for years. The tears slowly rolled down her cheek, but the judge wasn't finished. The courtroom remained silent as she moved to the second issue: Coyote Pass. The land that had once symbolized the Brown family's shared dream had now become the center of their legal conflict. The judge explained that financial documents clearly showed Christine had made contributions toward the property over time. Because of those contributions, the court determined she was legally entitled to a financial settlement representing her share of the land's current value. Then came the part that made several people in the courtroom gasp. If that payment was not completed within 6 months, the land would be placed on the market and sold. The ruling hung in the air like a thunderclap. Kody remained completely still in his chair, his jaw tightening as the reality of the decision settled in. For years, Coyote Pass had been the dream he believed would hold the family together. Now that dream was being divided by the court. The judge asked if either side wished to make a final statement before the case concluded. Christine slowly stood. The room grew quiet again when she spoke. Her voice was steady but emotional. "I didn't come here to hurt anyone," she said. "I came here to protect my daughter and to build a stable future." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of years of struggle. The judge nodded briefly. Then she raised the gavel. With that, this case is concluded. The sound of the gavel striking the desk echoed through the courtroom. Just like that, it was over outside the courthouse. The crowd of reporters immediately surged forward as the doors opened. Cameras flashed non-stop as Christine stepped outside. Voices shouted questions from every direction, but Christine stopped only for a brief moment. When asked how she felt about the outcome, she gave a short answer: "I feel free." Moments later she walked toward her car, leaving the courthouse behind. Kody exited shortly afterward. He moved past the cameras without saying a single word. Within hours, news of the ruling spread across the internet. Headlines appeared everywhere. For viewers who had followed the Brown family for years, it felt like the most dramatic chapter of their story. But for Christine and Kody, this moment wasn't television drama. It was the closing of a long and painful chapter. The marriage had ended. A dream had collapsed, and two people who once promised to share a life together were now walking in completely different directions. But for Christine, this wasn't just the end of something. It was the beginning of a brand new life. The courthouse was slowly emptying, but outside, the frenzy had just begun. Reporters shouted over each other, cameras flashed, and phones were raised high to capture every moment. Social media had already started buzzing. Clips of Christine leaving, saying "I feel free," were being shared and replayed across platforms. Christine walked steadily to her car, the weight of years finally lifting from her shoulders. She didn't smile, but there was a subtle relief in her expression, a quiet strength that said she had finally reclaimed control over her life. Meanwhile, Kody remained silent. He moved past the flashing cameras without a single word, leaving the courthouse behind, leaving the headlines behind, leaving the reality of the ruling to sink in. For someone so used to being the center of attention, this moment was unusually muted. Fans online immediately started debating. Comments flooded in. Finally, justice for Christine. Kody looks defeated. This is the moment the family TV saga ends. But for the Brown family themselves, this was far from entertainment. Back at her home, Christine finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. She reflected on everything she had endured. Years of compromise, constant public scrutiny, the emotional labor of raising children in a complicated household. And now, with primary custody secured and a fair settlement for the family land, she could finally start focusing on her daughter and her own future. Social media engagement was off the charts. Every clip, every photo, every statement was being dissected, shared, and discussed. The story was trending in the UK within hours. Viewers were captivated not just by the verdict, but by the human drama behind it, the struggles, the sacrifices, and the small victories. For Kody, the narrative had shifted. What had once been a story about his control, his charisma, his family empire, had now become a story about loss, reflection, and the consequences of decisions. As night fell over Flagstaff, one thing was clear. The Brown family chapter that audiences had watched for over a decade had officially closed. But the story of what comes next for both Christine and Kody was just beginning, and the world would be watching. Christine's final reflection to a reporter captured it all. "I've lost a lot along the way, but today I've gained peace. That's worth more than anything." And with that, the cameras stopped flashing. The microphones were lowered. The crowd dispersed. The courthouse steps, once filled with chaos and expectation, returned to quiet. But the echoes of this courtroom showdown would linger online, in headlines, and in conversations for months to come. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was a turning point, a new beginning, and for Christine, the start of her freedom. Days after the ruling, the story didn't just fade away. Social media exploded with reaction videos, memes, and heated debates. Fans dissected every frame of the courthouse footage. Every nod, every glance, every pause from both Christine and Kody was analyzed as if it were part of a new reality episode. In the UK, viewers were particularly captivated. Headlines like "Christine finally breaks free from Kody" and "Coyote Pass drama ends in court" were trending across multiple platforms. Discussions popped up in Facebook groups, Reddit threads, and Twitter threads where fans argued over who won and who lost. For Christine, the attention was secondary. She was focused on her daughter. School routines, doctor visits, bedtime stories, the everyday moments she had always managed alone, were now hers without interference. The legal battle had drained her, but it also cleared a path to stability and normalcy. Kody, on the other hand, faced public scrutiny like never before. Comment sections were relentless. Some sympathized, but most questioned his ability to maintain control over a family he